from the Civil War down to about 1900, late 1890s, prices were generally falling, and they were falling for good reason, namely that business was so competitive and the economy was so productive that the supply of goods and services was increasing at a rapid rate. In other words, that's when America industrialized. It was the biggest period of economic growth in the history of the world. And standard of living went up, and productivity went up, and prices fell. This did not mean that businesses were suffering, because costs were also falling as this productivity increased and mass production increased. So in this situation, the many business groups who tended to be inefficient try to correct this, try to correct this price falling situation by organizing cartels. In other words, by organizing a cartel of each industry so that they could cut production and raise prices. And this was tried in industry after industry, starting with the railroads, which were the first big business in the United States, first large-scale business, and continuing on through manufacturing by the late 1890s. Either trying through cartels, formal cartels, or through mergers. And in the late 1890s, the theory was, we'll just merge into we'll have one big firm for the entire steel industry, the oil industry, etc., and then we'll be able to cut production and raise prices and raise profits at the same time. So they tried this systematically. This was the ideology, so to speak, among businessmen, that the way to benefit for all of us is to have quotas, either formal quotas as in cartels or in mergers where you just agree that you'll have certain shares of this corporation, and then we'll cut production and raise prices. That was the great goal. All of this was a total flopperoo, and case after case, literally hundreds of cases of this kind of merger or cartel, they all flopped. And they flopped for two basic reasons. One is that an economic theory can predict this, and this is confirmed time and time again. Two basic reasons. One is, well, the basic reason is that the industry is free. Government did not step in and force people to accept the cartel or accept the merger. So what happens is that as soon as the cartel is formed or the merger is completed, and then they cut production and raise prices and profits go up, other businessmen come in and say, hey, this looks like a great industry here, the zinc industry or the oil industry or whatever, railroads. They're making a lot of profits. Let's nip in there and outcompete them because they're raising prices. And we're going to now come in with a new firm, a new factory, a new railroad, and we'll bust them. And that's exactly what happened. So you had new competition always coming in and outcompeting the older firms, and then the older firms are stuck with a new firm. Then you have a permanent competitor, which is a big pain in the neck because they come in with later equipment, with new factories and new equipment, the latest technology, etc. And now they have a permanent new competitor on their hands. So the whole thing became a big pain in the neck for them. And that's one reason. And then internally, what happened was that individual firms would start breaking the cartel. They say, look, we've raised, in other words, the cartel restricts production, raises prices are very high, and then the individual firm says, look, I'm not supposed to do this because I have a cartel agreement with the rest of my buddies in the industry, but here's what we're going to do. For you, my old pal and drinking buddy or whatever, my buyer, I will sell you the steel or the whatever, titanium, etc., for 20% off list, provided you don't tell anybody about it. Okay, so what you have is a secret price cutting, and then this firm gains profits, gains sales, and of course the secret leaks out pretty quickly after about 6 months or a year, and then the other firms get very mad about this, and they call it your rate buster, which is in business terms is equivalent to scab in union terms. And the whole cartel falls apart with mutual recrimination and hatred, and they're back where they started, except now they've got more hatred than they had before. So in other words, this system didn't work. The cartel policy, the merger policy, flopped. And at that point, some of each step of the way, some of the more far-sighted in the sense of realizing this was a flop among the business groups, decided the only way to preserve a cartel or preserve a merger is to have the government enforce it, to turn to the political arm to create the cartel for you. And this was the origin of progressive regulation. The progressive system was not a group of far-sighted essentially, it was not a group of far-sighted intellectuals who sat around and said, we have to plan, we have to curb businessmen for the sake of the public interest. It was a groups of businessmen saying we have to impose cartels through the government, and thereby eliminating our competition, curbing the maverick firm which doesn't want to engage in a cartel, and gaining profits that way. So, for example, in railroad regulation, the first things they did after the business put in the railroad businesses put in the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission, the first thing the ICC did was to outlaw secret price cutting. Because secret price cutting is always the great instrument by which an individual firm can bust the cartel. And how you do it? You do it in the name of publicity. Or you say, well, it's a terrible thing to have a secret price cutting. All prices should be, the books should be open. All firms should release publicity about their prices and costs and stuff, etc. So the public will know, the right to know and all that jazz. What it really meant was we want to know what our competitors are charging. And we do it by making the government make all of us release, open the books. So anyway, this is, and of course you do this in the name of openness or democracy or whatever, in the name of the public interest, because America was born in an anti-monopoly ideology, a hatred of monopoly, meaning, by the way, monopoly meant for centuries, until modern economics came in and poisoned the well, so to speak, what monopoly meant was very simple. It meant a grant of special privilege on the part of the government to different businesses for exclusive production or sale of a product, period. It didn't mean a large firm. It didn't mean a differentiated product and all the rest of it. And it meant very simply, grant by the government of exclusive privilege. It's very much like during the discussion of Professor Peden before, that when the church fathers attacked the rich, they didn't mean the rich, period. They meant tax collectors and so forth. It's a similar situation. A shift in the language. So how could they sell this to the American public? How could these business groups sell this, a compulsory cartel system, to the American public? They can't say we want compulsory cartels. So what they did was they created the ideology of the public interest. This is the public good. We have to curb evil business groups and sort of stuff. And the businessmen who took this position were then called enlightened by their allies, by the media, whatever, the media of that epoch. These are enlightened businessmen who rise above their own self-interest to look at the larger good. They have the far vision of, like Diocletian. They want to curb their selfish profits for the good of the entire industry and the good of the country. Now, how was this ideology pushed? The ideology was pushed very simply by intellectuals who are rising up. Throughout history, the statism has been imposed by two groups, an alliance of two groups. The state itself, the state apparatus, the king, the throne, and the opinion molding groups, the intellectuals, which in most cases in history have been the churches, the state church. And so this is known as the alliance of throne and altar. You have the church and the state. The church, the function of the church was to tell the people to obey the state. The state is God in many cases. The king is God. The king is divinely sanctioned. And in return for this, and the public believes them, because they're the intellectual opinion molders. And in return for that, the church gets part of the boodle. They get part of the state revenue in the form of tax subsidies and so forth. So this was a very cozy alliance until essentially Western Europe, until the age of Western Europe, and when church and state were separated. And essentially, in the progressive period in the early 20th century, you begin to reform the old alliance of intellectuals and government, big government intellectuals, who perform the function of court apologists for the new regime, and informing the public this is the public interest, the common good, the general welfare, and all the rest of it.